The worn-out couch was my throne, the flickering TV my court jester. The empty apartment was a testament to their absence, their relentless pursuit of a life they swore would one day be ours. My parents, Maria and David, were like ghosts, a fleeting presence in the morning before the first shift, and a weary whisper in the evening after the second. They believed in the American dream, a myth peddled to immigrants like them, a promise of a better tomorrow that they were working themselves to death for today. I, on the other hand, saw a different reality. The American dream wasn't a destination. It was a credit card with no limit. I was 19, and the world was an oyster I was determined to pry open with their savings. A new pair of sneakers here, a night out with friends there, a weekend trip to a city I couldn't afford. The money was always there, a steady stream flowing from their bank account into my hands. They never asked, and I never told. One evening, my mother found a receipt for a designer handbag I'd bought. Her face, usually etched with fatigue, hardened into a mask of disappointment. "Amelia," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "we work so hard for this money. Every dollar is a drop of our sweat." I just shrugged. "You're always working, Mom. What's the point of all that money if we can't enjoy it?" She didn't argue. She just looked at me, a silent reproach that was more painful than any lecture. The guilt was a fleeting thing, a momentary shadow that vanished the moment I saw another online sale. The desire for a life of comfort and luxury, a life I felt I deserved, was a fire in my belly. I wanted to be like the girls I saw on social media, living effortlessly, their lives a curated gallery of perfection. Their parents weren't ghosts. They were benefactors. The next morning I saw my father, his back hunched over the breakfast table, a coffee mug cradled in his calloused hands. He looked so tired, so defeated. A pang of guilt, sharper this time, pierced my heart. I almost apologized, almost promised to change. But then I remembered the designer shoes I had my eye on, the perfect match for the new handbag. The fleeting thought of their sacrifice was a small price to pay for my own happiness. A few days later, a new opportunity presented itself. A music festival in California, a chance to escape the mundane reality of my life. It would be expensive, but the money was there, waiting for me. I went to the bank, my heart pounding in my chest. I withdrew a large sum, far more than I had ever taken before. The teller's eyes lingered on me, a silent question I chose to ignore. This time I took more, and I didn't care. The festival was a blur of flashing lights, pulsating music, and a sea of anonymous faces. The sun beat down on us, and the air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and body odor. I was a different person here, a carefree spirit with no past and no future, living only for the moment. My phone was dead, a deliberate choice to disconnect from the world I had left behind. Back home, the silence was deafening. The phone rang and rang and rang, but I didn't answer. My parents were calling, worried about my sudden disappearance. They had no idea where I was, no way of knowing if I was safe. The silence was a physical weight, a growing pressure in the pit of my stomach. But I pushed it down, replaced it with another round of drinks and another song. A few days later, I returned to a house that felt both familiar and alien. The air was heavy, thick with a tension that was palpable. My parents were waiting for me, their faces a mixture of relief and anger. "Where were you, Amelia?" my mother asked, her voice shaking. "We were worried sick. I fabricated a story, a believable lie about a sudden trip with a friend, a broken phone, a series of unfortunate events. They didn't believe me, not entirely, but they were so relieved to see me safe that they let it slide." The conversation turned to the money. "Amelia," my father said, his voice low and heavy, "we've been looking at the bank statements. A lot of money is gone. Do you know anything about this?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this moment was coming. I looked him in the eye, my face a carefully constructed mask of innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dad," I lied, my voice steady. "Maybe there's a mistake." He just sighed, a sound of weary defeat. He knew. They both knew, but they didn't have proof. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. It was a chasm that had opened up between us, a space filled with unspoken accusations and bitter resentment. I was a stranger in my own home, a ghost haunting the lives of the people who had given me everything. Life at home became a tense dance of avoidance. I stayed in my room, emerging only for food, my presence a constant reminder of the money I had stolen. My parents' smiles were gone, replaced by a quiet, strained politeness. My mother would look at me as if she were trying to see the daughter she once knew, the girl who was full of dreams and kindness, not a girl who stole from her own family. One evening, I heard them talking in the living room. "I don't understand where we went wrong," my mother whispered, her voice laced with pain. "We gave her everything. Maybe that's the problem, Maria," my father replied, his voice heavy with sadness. "Maybe we gave her too much." Their words were a punch to the gut. I felt a fleeting sense of remorse, a brief desire to run out there and confess everything, to beg for their forgiveness. But the thought of losing my comfortable life, of having to work for every dollar, was a powerful deterrent. I couldn't go back, not now. I had to see this through. I started taking on small jobs, babysitting, walking dogs, anything to earn a little extra cash. It was a pathetic attempt to appease my guilt, a futile gesture to prove to myself that I could be a responsible adult. But the money I earned was a drop in the ocean compared to what I had taken. It was never enough. The tension at home reached a breaking point one Saturday afternoon. My father sat me down, a pile of bills on the table between us. "Amelia," he said, his voice firm, "we need to talk about the future. We can't keep living like this." He explained how their double shifts were no longer enough to cover the growing expenses, how their dreams of opening a small business were slowly fading away. "We need to start saving again, really saving. We can't afford any more surprises." His words were a warning, a gentle plea for me to change my ways. But I was so lost in my own self-pity and entitlement that I couldn't hear him. I saw his pain, his frustration, but I chose to ignore it. The lie I had built was a fortress, and I was trapped inside, unwilling to let anyone in. I wanted a life of ease, a life I felt was my birthright. The desire to prove him wrong, to show them I didn't need their money, was a new, dangerous fire. A few weeks later, I was on my laptop, looking for a way to make some real money, fast. That's when I found the ad, a get-rich-quick scheme that promised a life of luxury with minimal effort. It was a lie, a scam, but I was desperate enough to believe it. The online opportunity promised quick returns with a small initial investment. The website was slick, the testimonials convincing, and the promise of a life of luxury was intoxicating. I knew it was too good to be true, but I was so desperate to prove to my parents that I could succeed on my own that I ignored all the red flags. I saw it as a way out, a chance to erase my past mistakes and start over. I used the last of the money I had saved from my small jobs and transferred it to the scammer's account. I watched the numbers on my screen, a thrill of excitement coursing through me. I was going to be rich. I was going to be free. And I was going to be happy. The next day, I received an email asking for more money, a processing fee for my first payout. A tiny seed of doubt sprouted in my mind. I ignored it and transferred more money, a larger sum this time, a part of my parents' savings that I had been saving for a new phone. The hole I was digging was getting deeper, but I couldn't see it. I was blinded by greed and a desperate need to win. This cycle continued for a few weeks. Each email a new demand for more money. Each transfer a deeper plunge into financial ruin. The shame and guilt I felt were a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't shake off. I became more withdrawn, more isolated. My parents' concerned questions were met with angry glares and closed doors. One evening, my father knocked on my door. "Amelia," he said, his voice soft. "The bank called today. They said there's a problem with our account. The balance is almost at zero." The house of cards I had so carefully built came crashing down. My face drained of color, my heart pounded against my ribs. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. My father stood there, a look of profound betrayal on his face. "Why, Amelia?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this?" I had no answer. I just stood there, a silent statue of shame and regret. The silence was louder than any scream, more painful than any slap. It was the end of a chapter, the beginning of a new, darker one. Please, if you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. The following weeks were a living hell. The comfortable life I had taken for granted was gone. The bank account was frozen, and the bills were piling up. My parents' dreams of a small business were shattered, their retirement plans in jeopardy. The smiles were gone from their faces, replaced by a constant look of worry and despair. They didn't scream. They didn't yell. They just went about their day, their silence a constant, agonizing reminder of my betrayal. My mother would look at me with eyes full of a pain that was 1,000 times worse than any anger. My father's face was a mask of disappointment. I was no longer their daughter. I was a thief, a parasite who had sucked them dry. I tried to make things right. I offered to get a full-time job, to pay them back every last penny, but they just shook their heads. "It's not about the money, Amelia," my father said one evening, his voice heavy with sadness. "It's about trust. It's about how you could do this to your own family." His words were a knife to the heart. I had always seen them as a bottomless ATM, a source of endless funds, but I had never stopped to think about the human cost. I had never considered the sacrifices they had made, the dreams they had put on hold, the love they had showered on me, only to have it all thrown back in their faces. The fake get-rich-quick scheme was a bust, of course. The scammers disappeared, taking my money and leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a crushing sense of failure. The irony was not lost on me. I had tried to take a shortcut to success, and I had ended up with nothing. I started to see the world differently. I saw the struggle in the faces of the people around me, the weary lines around their eyes, the tired slump of their shoulders. I saw my parents in every single one of them. I had been so blind, so self-absorbed, that I had never seen their pain, their exhaustion, their quiet desperation. The realization was a punch to the gut. I had taken their dreams and sold them for a few cheap thrills. I had betrayed their trust, and I had destroyed their lives. And for what? A fleeting moment of glory, a few weeks of living a lie. The price was too high. The cost was too great. The turning point came one morning when I saw my father getting ready for work. He was no longer the strong, imposing figure I remembered. He was older, his hair grayer, his shoulders more stooped. As he put on his worn-out jacket, he winced, a brief flash of pain crossing his face. I knew then that I had to do something real, something that would prove to them that I wasn't a lost cause. I started looking for a job, a real job, not just a side hustle. It was a long and arduous process, but I was determined. I filled out countless applications, went to endless interviews, and faced a lot of rejection. But I didn't give up. I had to prove to my parents and to myself that I could be a responsible adult, that I could earn my own way in the world. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found a job as a waitress at a local diner. The pay was low, the hours were long, and the work was exhausting. But for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose. I was earning my own money, every single dollar a testament to my hard work and determination. I started giving a portion of my paycheck to my parents, a small gesture of my remorse. They were hesitant at first, but I insisted. "It's not about the money," I told them, using the words my father had once said to me. "It's about trying to make things right." The atmosphere at home slowly began to change. The tension was still there, a lingering shadow, but it was slowly dissipating, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. My mother started talking to me again, asking about my day, sharing stories from her own life. My father would sometimes smile at me, a small, weary smile that spoke volumes. I was no longer a ghost in my own home. I was a person, a daughter who had made a terrible mistake, but a daughter who was trying to atone for her sins. The road to redemption was long and difficult, but I was determined to walk it, every single step of the way. The life I had always dreamed of was gone, but a new life was beginning to take shape, a life built on honesty, hard work, and a genuine desire to be a better person. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a glimmer of a future that was not defined by my past mistakes. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the diner, I was walking home, my feet aching, my mind exhausted. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a million tiny stars in a dark sky. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I was tired, but it was an honest, good kind of tired, the kind you feel after a day of hard work. As I was about to cross the street, I saw a familiar face. It was Mr. Henderson, a kind old man who lived a few blocks away. He was a regular at the diner, and we had often talked about his late wife, about his garden, about the simple things in life. He was a man who lived a life of quiet dignity and grace. He was standing on the corner, looking confused, a grocery bag clutched in his hand. He seemed lost, his eyes darting around, a flicker of panic in his face. I walked over to him. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "are you okay?" He looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Oh, Amelia," he said, his voice shaky. "I seem to have lost my way. My wife, she used to take care of all the errands. I'm just so lost without her." A wave of empathy washed over me. I thought about my own parents, about how much they relied on each other, about how lost they would be without one another. I took Mr. Henderson's arm. "It's okay," I said, my voice soft. "I'll help you get home." As we walked, he told me stories about his wife, about their life together, about the simple moments that made their love so special. He talked about her garden, about the roses she loved so much, about the way she would always leave a note for him on the kitchen counter. His words were a poignant reminder of the things that truly matter in life, the things I had so carelessly thrown away. When we reached his house, he thanked me profusely. "You're a good girl, Amelia," he said, his eyes filled with a gratitude that was more meaningful than any compliment. "Your parents must be so proud of you." His words, meant to be kind, were a dagger to my heart. I knew the truth, and the truth was that my parents were not proud of me. They were hurt. They were disappointed. They were a shadow of their former selves because of my selfishness. But Mr. Henderson's belief in me, his simple act of kindness, was a powerful motivator. I was not a lost cause. I could be a good person. Please, if you're enjoying this story, remember to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. The holidays were approaching, a time of family, of love, of togetherness. But for us, it was a time of painful reminders, a time of ghosts from a past that was no longer ours. The Christmas decorations, once a source of joy, were now a constant, agonizing reminder of the life we had lost. My mother tried to keep up the traditions. She baked cookies. She put up the tree. She tried to create a sense of normalcy. But the joy was gone. The smiles were forced. The laughter was hollow. We were a family in name only, a group of strangers living under the same roof, bound together by a shared pain. I felt a profound sense of guilt. It was my fault. I had stolen their joy, their happiness, their dreams. I had taken their future and sold it for a few fleeting moments of pleasure. The weight of my actions was a heavy cloak, a constant companion that I couldn't shake off. One snowy evening, I found my father sitting in the living room, a photo album in his lap. He was looking at a picture of us, a picture of a younger, happier family. He was smiling. My mother was laughing, and I was a little girl, my arms wrapped around them, my face full of a carefree joy that was now a distant memory. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Do you remember this, Amelia?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "This was our first Christmas in this house. We had nothing, but we had each other. We had a future." His words were a gut punch. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I would give anything to go back in time and change things, but the words were stuck in my throat. I just stood there, a silent witness to the pain I had caused. The silence was a thick blanket, a chasm that had opened up between us. But then, my father did something unexpected. He patted the couch beside him. "Sit with me, Amelia," he said, his voice soft. "Let's look at some old memories." I sat down, and for the first time in a long time, we were just a father and a daughter, a family trying to heal. We looked at old photos. We talked about old memories, and for a few fleeting moments, the past was not a source of pain, but a source of shared history. The ghost of Christmas past was no longer a haunting presence, but a gentle reminder of the love that had once bound us together. The holidays passed, and a new year began, a new chapter, a new opportunity for change. I was working full-time at the diner, and I was slowly paying back my parents. The progress was slow, but it was real. Every dollar I earned, every hour I worked, was a small step towards redemption, a small gesture of my love and remorse. One evening, my mother sat me down. "Amelia," she said, her voice soft but firm, "your father and I have been talking. We want to try again. We want to open our small business, but we need your help." I was stunned. I had expected them to be angry, to hold a grudge forever, but here they were, offering me a second chance, a chance to be a part of their dream, a chance to help them rebuild the life I had destroyed. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. I was so grateful, so humbled, so filled with a sense of purpose that I had never felt before. We started working together, a family united by a shared goal. My father handled the finances, my mother handled the marketing, and I worked at the diner, saving every penny, every single dollar a contribution to our shared dream. The work was hard, the hours were long, and there were many setbacks. But we faced them together, as a family. We were no longer a group of strangers living under the same roof. We were a team, a unit, a family. I realized then that happiness was not about a new pair of shoes or a designer handbag. It was about hard work, about sacrifice, about the love of a family. I had learned a painful lesson, but it was a lesson that had changed my life forever. I was no longer the girl who took from others. I was the girl who gave back. I was no longer a selfish child. I was a grown woman, a partner in my family's dream. The grand opening of Maria's kitchen was a day I will never forget. The small restaurant was filled with the smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of laughter, and the warmth of a dream come true. My parents were beaming, their faces filled with a pride and happiness that I had not seen in years. I stood in the back, watching them, tears of joy and pride streaming down my face. I had done this. I had helped them. I had paid them back, not just with money, but with a sense of purpose, with a love and a respect that had been lost for so long. A few days later, my father sat me down in the quiet of the restaurant, a cup of coffee in his hand. "Amelia," he said, "I have to confess something. The bank account was never at zero. We had enough money to cover the bills. I just wanted you to see what it was like to face the consequences of your actions." My heart stopped. The betrayal, the anger, the pain I had caused, it was all a lie. But then I saw the truth in his eyes. He hadn't done it to hurt me. He had done it to teach me a lesson. He had done it out of love. "We knew you were lost," he said, his voice soft. "We knew you needed to learn what it was like to be a part of something bigger than yourself, to work for something you truly cared about. We had to let you fall so you could learn to get up again." His words were a powerful emotional blow. I was a thief, a liar, a parasite who had stolen from her own family, and yet they had loved me enough to let me fail, to let me suffer, to let me learn the hard way. They had given me a second chance not because I deserved it, but because they loved me. I finally confessed everything, all the lies, all the betrayals, all the selfishness. My parents listened, their faces filled with a quiet understanding. When I was done, my mother hugged me, a long, comforting hug that spoke volumes. "We love you, Amelia," she whispered. "We're just so glad you're back." I was not the same person who had started this journey. The girl who had drained her parents' savings was gone, replaced by a woman who had learned the value of hard work, of family, of love. The pain of my past was a scar, a constant reminder of the lessons I had learned, but it was a scar that had made me stronger, more resilient, and a better person.